She threw me on the street the day after my son's funeral, claiming the house was hers now. Her heels clicked against the porch as she stood there, arms crossed, watching me struggle with my suitcases. I could still smell the flowers from Andrew's service on my coat, still hear the choir in my head. And now this, my own daughter-in-law, Vanessa Holloway, telling me I no longer belonged in the home I helped them buy. At the will reading, she laughed. "Hope you enjoy being homeless, Margaret," she said, voice dripping with fake pity. But then the lawyer reached for a sealed envelope Andrew had left behind, one that would change everything. "If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from." Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or cruel. Sometimes it's just letting people reveal exactly who they really are. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. For a split second, when Andrew's name lit up my phone, I smiled. He always called when he couldn't sleep. But this time his voice was hoarse, broken, fighting for breath. "Mom, something's wrong." My chest, "I can't." Then the line went dead. I drove through the empty streets, half awake, half praying, running every red light between my house and the hospital. By the time I reached the emergency room, the world had already moved on without him. The doctor's face told me everything before he spoke. "Massive heart attack," he said quietly, in that careful, practiced tone people use when they've said the same terrible words too many times. We did everything we could. The hallway lights blurred. The air smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. Somewhere a monitor beeped, steady and indifferent. I stood there clutching my purse like it could keep me upright. My 45-year-old son, my boy who fixed everything for everyone, was gone. Vanessa stood beside me, perfectly composed. Her hands were clasped together, her shoulders straight, her expression the picture of tragedy. A single tear slid down her cheek, almost like she'd timed it. And yet beneath that polished grief, I caught something, a flicker in her eyes. Not pain, not disbelief, something colder. Relief. No, I told myself, I was imagining it. Grief does strange tricks on the mind. Still, I couldn't shake the chill that crept up my spine as she turned to the doctor, voice steady, businesslike. "What happens next? What happens next?" As if losing Andrew were an item on her to-do list. I sank into a plastic chair in the waiting room, my hands trembling around a paper cup of untouched coffee. The fluorescent light hummed above me. The clock ticked too loudly. For the first time in my life, I realized silence could hurt more than any sound in the world. The morning after Andrew's death, the house was unbearably still. The kind of stillness that hums in your ears until you realize it's not silence at all. It's absence. His laughter had always filled this space, bouncing off the kitchen walls, echoing down the hallway. Now there was only the soft ticking of the clock, a cruel reminder that time kept moving even when your world stopped. His coat still hung by the door. His coffee mug, half full, sat on the counter, the rim faintly smudged with his thumbprint. The air still carried the faint scent of his cologne, the one he'd worn since college. I pressed my fingers against the sleeve of his sweater draped over the chair, still warm from the sun filtering through the blinds, and whispered his name. But the house didn't answer back. Andrew had been our bridge, mine and Vanessa's. He was the reason we pretended to get along, the gravity that kept two opposite worlds in the same orbit. When he smiled, the edges of our resentment softened. When he spoke, there was warmth between us. But now that bridge had collapsed into the same silence that filled every corner of the house. I found Vanessa in the living room, framed by morning light spilling across the floor. She was staring out the window toward the driveway, motionless, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a moment, I thought she was crying, but when she turned, her eyes were dry, her voice clear and cold. "Now we deal with reality," she said evenly. "Andrew's gone, and I have decisions to make." Her words sliced through the quiet like a knife. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard her. Decisions? About what? About who? My throat tightened as I stepped closer, searching her face for any flicker of grief, some trace of the woman who once called me Mom, who had laughed beside me at family dinners, who held Andrew's hand with devotion. But the woman standing before me now was carved from something harder. Calm, perfect, hollow. "Of course, dear," I said softly, fighting to steady my voice. "We'll get through this together." She turned her head slightly, and for the briefest second, a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. Not of comfort, but of control. "We'll see about that," she murmured. The air seemed to change. Even the sunlight felt colder, paler. I stood there, frozen, watching her walk away, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, sharp, deliberate, final. That was the moment I felt it, the bridge between us cracking, splinter by splinter. And though I didn't realize it then, those 5 words, "We'll see about that," were the first tremor of the storm that was coming. The morning of Andrew's funeral dawned clear and cruelly bright, the kind of day that should have felt hopeful, but only made the loss sharper. The sun was warm, the sky a perfect blue, as if the world had decided to mock my grief by being beautiful. The church was full long before the service began. Rows of faces blurred together, neighbors, colleagues, distant cousins, all dressed in black, whispering behind tissues and polite sadness. The scent of lilies was everywhere, heavy and suffocating. They were Andrew's favorite flower, Vanessa had insisted, and she'd ordered hundreds. I'll give her credit, it was flawless. The music, the decor, the framed photos lining the aisle. She'd turned grief into choreography. Every detail of the ceremony reflected her sense of control, immaculate, deliberate, staged. Even her black dress was perfect, tailored to fit her like armor. She clutched a single white rose, her expression poised somewhere between heartbreak and composure, as though she'd practiced it in the mirror. When I stood to give my eulogy, my hands trembled. My voice broke halfway through the second line. My son, Andrew, had the kind of heart that filled a room. The words crumbled under the weight of what they meant. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the pews. I could feel Vanessa's eyes on me, unreadable, cold. After the service, the reception began in the church hall. Tables of sandwiches and tea, hushed conversations about how strong Vanessa was, how graceful she'd been through it all. People patted my hand and told me I should be proud. I nodded, smiled, said the right things. Inside, I was hollow. I moved through the crowd on autopilot, accepting condolences I barely heard. And then, a whisper caught my ear. It was Vanessa's voice. Low, sharp, too sharp. "The life insurance alone will cover the mortgage for 2 years," she said, her tone clipped, practical. I froze. My back was to her, but I didn't need to turn to recognize that tone, the one she used when negotiating, not grieving. Rebecca Moore, her sister, murmured something, hesitant, uneasy. And, what about Margaret? Where will she go? There was a short, brittle laugh, one I'd never heard from her before. That's not my problem anymore. She'll figure it out. She always does. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The sound of clinking cups, the murmur of voices, the faint notes of piano music. Everything went distant, muffled, like I'd slipped underwater. I turned slightly, just enough to see her reflection in the glass doors. Vanessa, standing tall, her smile polite, her eyes bright with something that wasn't grief. She looked free. It hit me then. She wasn't mourning my son. She was already planning her next move. The room tilted. My knees felt weak. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself, forcing a smile at the well-meaning woman beside me who asked if I was all right. Yes, I lied. Just a little lightheaded. I looked at Vanessa again. Her perfect posture, her flawless hair, her calm gestures as she greeted guests. Everything about her screamed in control. And that's when I realized Andrew had been the only reason she ever pretended to care. Now that he was gone, the mask could finally come off. By the time the last guest left and the final hymn faded, the church was quiet again. Vanessa stood by the exit, thanking people with her hand over her heart, eyes glistening just enough for sympathy. But when she turned toward me, her expression changed, just slightly. The softness vanished. "Let's head home," she said, her tone flat. "There are things we need to discuss." The words hung heavy in the air, sharper than any condolence. And as I followed her out of the church into the blinding sunlight, a chill crept through me. Because for the first time, I understood that the real storm, the one Andrew had unknowingly left behind, was only just beginning. The house was quiet when we got back from the funeral. Too quiet. Not the gentle hush of rest, but the hollow quiet that follows a performance, the kind that settles after the last clap dies. when the audience files out, the stage lights cool, and whatever was pretending to be true slips off with the makeup. What remains is bare and fluorescent. I set my purse on the hallway table, the leather thudding softly against the wood. I was still clutching the folded eulogy like a lifeline. The paper had softened under my damp fingers, creased and bruised where I'd squeezed too hard. The air smelled faintly of lilies from the service, sweet at first, then cloying, edging toward something sickly. I glanced up the staircase. Andrew's door was closed. Just as he'd left it the last morning, he kissed my cheek and told me he'd be home for dinner. The sight of it punched the breath out of me. I took a single step toward the stairs, just one, when Vanessa's voice snapped the thread. "Margaret," she called from the kitchen. "We need to talk." Her tone wasn't tired. It wasn't frayed by grief or softened by the day. It was clean-edged, honed, efficient. A summons. I followed the sound into the kitchen. Afternoon light slipped through the blinds in neat ladders, striping the floor and the side of the refrigerator. Vanessa stood by the counter, arms crossed. Her phone lay face down beside a half-empty glass of wine. A red crescent had bled down the rim like lipstick on porcelain. The pendant light above the island threw a cool circle over her and caught the tiny studs in her ears. Expensive, exacting, deliberate. Her posture said everything before her mouth did. "I'm in charge now." She didn't invite me to sit. "I'll be direct," she said, eyes steady, unblinking. "This house is in Andrew's name, which means it's mine now." For a heartbeat, the sentence didn't fit anywhere inside my head. It didn't land, it clanged. Metal dropped on tile. I stared at her, and the kitchen, the faucets, the bowl of lemons, the neat stack of mail wavered, as if the room itself recoiled. "Vanessa," I started gently, reaching for the corner of the counter to steady my hand. "I know you're hurting. We both are. But surely," she raised her palm, not high, not rude, just precise, slicing my sentence in two. "No, I'm not discussing this. I need time and space to process my grief without complications." The word snagged. "Complications?" My voice betrayed me, a tremor under the syllables. "Is that what I am now?" Her face didn't move. "Not a muscle. You living here, it's not working anymore. I need my privacy. You understand?" Polite words. Brutal meaning. No warmth. No hesitation. Just an elegant cruelty, wrapped in etiquette and served room temperature. I looked away because looking at her hurt. My gaze fell to the table, the one where we'd eaten Sunday dinners. Andrew cooked too salty, and we'd laughed anyway. My eyes found the chair he always pulled out for me with a wink. I could almost hear the ghost of his voice. "Come on, Mom. Sit. I made too much." The echo lifted, then flattened, like steam that had nowhere left to rise. "I'll need some time," I whispered, surprised by how small my voice sounded in our kitchen. "A week, maybe 2, to find a place." "You have until tomorrow evening," she said cleanly, quickly. "That should be plenty of time." The blade finally bit. Tomorrow evening. 24 hours to vacuum myself out of corners, to fold a lifetime into boxes that wouldn't close. 24 hours to erase fingerprints and love and the line my slippers had made on the pantry mat. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" I asked. It came out as air more than sound. She shrugged. It was delicate, almost pretty, rehearsed, like the rest of her. A perfect little lift that said this was not her concern. "You're a grown woman, Margaret. You'll figure it out." There it was, the naked thing beneath the silk. To her, I wasn't family. I was clutter. I was the layer of dust you notice when the sun hits the shelf just so. I was an item on her list. Remove, replace, refresh. I didn't move. Something inside me did, though. Grief, heavy as wet wool, shifted and hardened along its edges. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. A spine forming. "Andrew would be horrified if he heard you speak this way," I said, barely above the hum of the refrigerator. I said his name carefully, like a glass I refused to drop. "Andrew's dead," she replied, her voice flat enough to skate across. "And the sooner you accept that, the better off we'll both be." We stood there, 2 statues in a kitchen that had known better days. The refrigerator murmured. The ice maker clicked somewhere in its belly. The wall clock ticked, dutiful and indifferent, counting out the seconds of a life I was no longer allowed to inhabit. Light and shadow on the floor shifted one rung lower. She turned first, of course she did, collecting her phone without looking at it, sliding the glass into the sink with a soft ring. Her heels tapped once on the hardwood as she left the room, a metronome's final beat. I stayed. I touched the back of Andrew's chair, then withdrew my hand as if the wood were hot. The lilies from the service were on the counter in a tall vase, their petals already dropping in perfect white commas onto the granite. I listened to the house breathe the way a house does when it is not yours anymore. And in that precise, polished silence, something settled that would not be moved. Grief hadn't broken her, it had freed her. It had cut the tether of pretense and let her drift exactly where she intended to go. By tomorrow night, she meant to make sure I was gone. That night, sleep didn't come. Not even the false kind that grief sometimes grants, the merciful haze where pain softens for a few hours. The house around me creaked and sighed like an old ship adrift, shifting in the dark. Every groan of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the eaves reminded me, this place no longer belonged to me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where the light from the hallway used to spill in under Andrew's door. I could almost hear it again, his voice downstairs teasing Vanessa as she burned the garlic bread, their laughter rising and falling like a song I thought would play forever. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint pulse of the clock, counting down to my exile. The silence pressed against my ribs until I could barely breathe. It was strange how grief could feel heavy and hollow at the same time, as if my body were made of glass, filled with stones. At dawn, I opened the closet. Inside hung the small remains of a long life. A few dresses, a winter coat, the cardigan Andrew had bought me last Mother's Day, still smelling faintly of lavender and sun. My fingers brushed against the sleeve, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Folding it felt like betrayal. I packed each item with reverence, as though I were handling relics of a lost civilization. 4 suitcases, 2 boxes, 67 years of living folded into the trunk of a car. Every zipper sounded like the closing of a chapter. The room itself seemed to mourn with me. The morning light fell across the bed where I had once sat reading bedtime stories to Andrew. Dust drifted through the air, slow and aimless, like the souls of old memories refusing to leave. On the nightstand sat a photo of him in his college cap, his smile full of promise. I pressed it to my chest before wrapping it carefully in a towel. The ceramic mug he'd made in 3rd grade, the one with the crooked handle, went into the last box. Even the sheets on the bed smelled like goodbye. Downstairs, I heard movement. The rhythm of heels clicking across the tile, the sound of a drawer shutting, a spoon stirring coffee. Vanessa was awake. Not grieving, just moving on. Her world hadn't ended. She was already rebuilding hers from the pieces of mine. When I carried the first suitcase down, she was in the kitchen. The air smelled of perfume and espresso. She didn't look up when she spoke. Almost done? Her voice was calm, bright, polished. The same voice she used with real estate agents and delivery men. Almost, I said, my throat tightening. I'll just need a few more minutes. She turned then, leaning against the counter, crossing her arms. I'll help you. It wasn't kindness. It was control. We made 3 trips to the car. Not a single word. The thud of luggage against the trunk was the only punctuation between us. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. A few petals from the funeral wreath had blown loose and clung to the driveway. I stepped over them carefully, unwilling to crush what little beauty was left of yesterday. By the final trip, my hands were shaking. I turned to the house, the windows gleaming in the morning sun, the curtains fluttering slightly. How could something so familiar look so foreign? My reflection wavered faintly in the glass cabinet. A tired woman, hollowed out, clutching the fragments of a life that no longer fit anywhere. I know you're angry, I said softly, finally looking at her. I wish I knew what I'd done wrong so I could fix it. Vanessa didn't blink. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You didn't do anything wrong, Margaret, she said, her tone gentle but stripped of any real feeling. You just exist in my space. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The words landed with surgical precision. Clean, final, merciless. That was the truth she'd been circling since the funeral. I nodded slowly, swallowing the ache rising in my chest. I see. It was all I could say without breaking. Then I turned, walked to my car, and closed the door. The seat was cold. The steering wheel trembled under my hands. Through the windshield, I saw her still standing there in the doorway. Back straight, face serene, not a flicker of regret. She looked almost like a portrait, a woman who'd just reclaimed her house, her solitude, her control. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The sunlight hit the windows, and for a split second, it looked like fire, a perfect illusion of warmth where none remained. Only when the curve of the road finally swallowed it did I let the sob escape, the kind that starts in the bones and tears its way out. But beneath the grief, there was something else, a fragile, trembling thread of peace. Because sometimes, the only thing left to take with you is your dignity. And when they've taken everything else, that is still enough to start over. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and lost stories, that sharp, lonely scent that clings to places meant for passing through, not for staying. The clerk at the front desk hadn't looked me in the eye when he handed me the key card. Room 212. Elevators to your left, he mumbled, his voice polite but distant. The kind of tone people use when they see a woman alone, with too much luggage and no destination. I thanked him out of habit and dragged my suitcases toward the elevator. The wheels rattled softly against the floor, echoing in the empty lobby. Inside the lift, the fluorescent light buzzed above me, casting pale reflections on the silver walls. I caught a glimpse of myself, a woman unrecognizable, smaller somehow, like she'd been folded too many times and lost her shape. The hallway smelled of stale air and detergent. The carpet muffled my footsteps and the lights flickered in slow, uneven rhythms, like a heartbeat struggling to keep time. When I finally opened the door, the room exhaled a gust of recycled cold air that carried no welcome, only function. It was small, too small. A single bed, its sheets stiff and too white. A nightstand with a sticky drawer. A TV bolted to the wall, still glowing faintly with the reflection of commercials from another world. The curtains didn't quite close, and through the thin gap I could see the neon sign outside. Hampton Inn, vacancy. The letter P flickered in and out, like even the sign was too tired to hold itself together. I set my suitcases down and stood still, listening. The silence was heavy, but not cruel, just indifferent. The kind of silence that doesn't care if you cry. When I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaned under my weight. The mirror on the wall faced me directly, unkind and unforgiving. A woman stared back, hair unkempt, eyes swollen, shoulders rounded by too many goodbyes. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. For the first time in 67 years, I had nowhere to go. No husband, no son, no home. Just 4 suitcases, 2 boxes, and a future I hadn't planned for. The tears came quietly, not the violent kind that shakes the body, but the quiet surrender, one drop after another, until my blouse clung damp against my chest. I buried my face in my hands and let it come. Grief had been following me for days, waiting for this moment. The first time I stopped moving long enough for it to catch up. When it was done, I felt hollow, not empty, just scraped clean. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under the yellow glow of the streetlights. A man in a hoodie leaned against a vending machine, smoking, his face ghosted by the haze. Somewhere, a car door slammed. Life was still happening, ordinary, indifferent, unapologetically moving forward. And somehow, that steadied me. The world hadn't ended. Only mine had. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way to start again. I went down to the lobby and poured myself a cup of coffee from the machine. It was burnt, bitter, and too hot, but it was warm, and right then, warmth was enough. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and ran my fingers along the edge of the motel phone. For a heartbeat, I expected it to ring, to hear Andrew's voice again, soft and teasing, saying, "Mom, it's late. Go to sleep." But the phone stayed silent, its red light blinking faintly, like the echo of a heartbeat that had already stopped. I exhaled slowly. Vanessa thought she'd won. She believed she'd buried me along with her husband, erased me from the story she wanted to live. But she didn't know Andrew. My son, my quiet, careful, methodical boy, had always been 10 steps ahead. He saw what I refused to see. He had been preparing for this moment for years. I didn't know it then, sitting in that cheap motel room with my life packed into boxes at my feet. But the story wasn't over. It was only shifting, from grief to reckoning. And as I turned off the light and lay back on the stiff, starched sheets, I felt something stir inside me for the first time since 3:17 in the morning, when the call came and my world shattered. It wasn't peace. It wasn't comfort. It was purpose. Because sometimes, the night you lose everything is the same night you start to find yourself again. It was late afternoon when the call came. The kind of slow, golden hour that makes even a cheap motel room look gentler than it is. I'd been sitting by the window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the shadows of passing cars crawl up the walls. The day had stretched quiet and uneventful, the kind of day that doesn't expect anything from you. Then the phone rang. I jumped. For a moment, my heart betrayed me. I thought it might be Andrew. I still wasn't used to the truth. The ring was sharp, insistent, pulling me back to the world that kept turning. "Mrs. Holloway," a calm professional voice said when I answered. "This is Edward Langston from Langston & Associates. I handled your son Andrew's legal affairs." I straightened instinctively, my pulse quickening. Yes, of course, Mr. Langston. I remember you." "I'm calling to inform you," he continued, his tone measured but kind, "that the probate process has been completed. There will be a formal reading of your son's will this coming Tuesday at 2 o'clock in my office. Your presence is required." For a moment, the words just hung in the air. Your presence is required. It felt strange. After weeks of being unwanted, unseen, erased, to hear that someone, somewhere, still required me. I see, I managed. "Thank you, Mr. Langston. I'll be there." After he hung up, I sat there with the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty hum of the dial tone. My reflection in the window looked different, sharper somehow, as if a small light had flickered back to life behind my eyes. Andrew had left something for me. Maybe it was nothing, a keepsake, a letter, a memory he wanted me to hold. Or maybe it was something more. I set the phone down carefully and stared at my hands. They were trembling, but not from grief this time. From purpose, from the faint, steady rhythm of possibility. For the first time since losing him, I felt the weight of my sorrow shift, not disappear, but move aside just enough to let something stronger breathe. Andrew had known. He'd planned for this, and somewhere in that lawyer's office, locked away behind signatures and sealed envelopes, was the next chapter of the story he'd begun. A chapter Vanessa didn't even know existed. I glanced at the mirror again. The woman looking back at me was still grieving, still tired, still alone. But there was something else now, too. Something clear and unwavering in her eyes. Determination. Because when the world takes everything from you, even the smallest spark of hope becomes a weapon. And mine had just been lit by the sound of a phone ringing in a motel room at sunset. The sky that Tuesday looked like brushed steel, cold, reflective, unyielding. Rain had fallen all morning, leaving the streets slick and silver. By the time I reached the law office, the world outside had quieted into that strange stillness that comes after a storm, when even the air seems to wait. Langston & Associates sat on a quiet corner downtown, a modest building with green awnings and polished brass letters on the glass door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar, coffee, and old paper. That scent of things meant to last. Vanessa's car was already parked out front, a silver BMW gleaming wet under the gray sky. Beside it, another car, her brother Lucas's black sedan. When I walked through the door, the receptionist, a young woman with a soft bun and calm eyes, looked up at me. "Mrs. Holloway? Mr. Langston is expecting you." Her name tag read Mia Collins. Before I could thank her, I heard Vanessa's voice, low and sharp from the waiting area. "What is she doing here?" I turned and saw her, perfectly put together as always. Black dress, pearl earrings, heels that clicked like punctuation. Her grief, like her perfume, had long since become just another accessory. Lucas stood beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit right, phone in hand, his thumb tapping impatiently. Mia hesitated. Mrs. Holloway was invited to attend. Mr. Langston's instructions were very clear. Vanessa's lips twitched into something between a smile and a sneer. We'll see about that. At that moment, the door to the inner office opened, and Edward Langston appeared. Silver hair, round glasses, the kind of man whose presence seemed to quiet a room. He smiled, gentle but firm. Ladies, Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. Please, this way. The hallway was lined with framed diplomas and sepia photographs. Each step echoed faintly on the hardwood floor, a rhythm of tension neither of us broke. The office itself was what you'd expect from a man who had built his career on trust. Shelves of law books, a mahogany desk worn smooth by time, a banker's lamp throwing soft light across a stack of folders. Rain tapped lightly against the window, steady, patient. Please sit, Edward said, settling into his chair. Vanessa crossed her legs elegantly, hands folded in her lap. Lucas sat beside her, pen ready, the page of his notebook blank but expectant. I took the seat opposite them, the leather cool against my palms. Edward unfolded the first page, adjusted his glasses, and began. This is the last will and testament of Andrew Holloway. My son's name filled the room like a bell. Even after all these weeks, hearing it still made my throat tighten. Edward's voice was calm, practiced, deliberate. He listed each asset: the house, the car, the retirement accounts, the life insurance. To my wife, Vanessa Holloway, I leave all property and financial assets registered under my name. Vanessa didn't look at me, but I saw the faint curve of satisfaction tugging at her mouth, subtle but unmistakable. Lucas leaned forward, jotting down notes as if auditing her inheritance. Then a pause, the kind that makes the air hold its breath. Edward turned the page slowly, his eyes scanning the last paragraph. His tone shifted, softer, almost reverent. There is, however, one final provision, added 3 months prior to Mr. Holloway's passing. The room stilled. Even the ticking clock seemed to hesitate. Vanessa's hands unclasped. Lucas's pen froze mid-stroke. I felt my heartbeat in my fingertips. Edward continued, his voice steady. To my mother, Margaret Holloway, who provided the down payment for our home and never asked for repayment, I leave the contents of safety deposit box number 3537 at First National Bank, along with all associated documentation and account information contained therein. For a moment, no one spoke. The rain against the window filled the silence, a delicate rhythmic applause from the world outside. Vanessa was the first to move. Her head snapped toward Edward. What safety deposit box? She demanded, her voice cutting through the quiet like glass breaking. Edward folded his hands. Your husband maintained it privately. He was specific that its contents belong exclusively to Mrs. Holloway. Her composure cracked, just slightly. That's impossible. Andrew never mentioned any deposit box. Edward's expression didn't change. Nonetheless, Mrs. Holloway, the document is legal, witnessed, and notarized. His wishes were very clear. Lucas leaned forward. And what exactly is in this box? I don't know, Edward said honestly. Mr. Holloway did not disclose its contents, only that his mother would understand their significance. I felt the weight of that line settle deep in my chest. Would understand their significance. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. If there's anything valuable in that box, it should be part of the estate. We'll contest it. Edward leaned back, calm as a man watching a storm from behind glass. You're free to do so. But the clause is airtight. It was added when your husband was in full health and sound mind. I witnessed it myself. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, electric. I could feel Vanessa's glare burning into the side of my face, but I kept my eyes on the document before me. Andrew had left something. Not money, perhaps. Something more deliberate, more intentional. When Edward slid a sealed envelope across the table toward me, my breath caught. Mrs. Holloway, he said gently, your son instructed that this key and these documents be given to you personally. Inside the envelope was a small brass key, its edges worn smooth by use. The tag attached read, Box 3537, First National Bank. My fingers closed around it slowly. It felt heavier than it looked. Vanessa's voice trembled, no longer polished, just raw. "You can't possibly let her open that alone." Edward looked at her over the rim of his glasses. "I'm afraid that's not your decision. Access to the box is restricted to Mrs. Holloway only." Her jaw clenched. Her brother reached out to steady her arm, but she pulled away. I rose to my feet, the key still in my hand. The metal felt warm against my palm, as if Andrew himself had just placed it there. "Thank you, Mr. Langston," I said quietly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were beginning to break, and a narrow beam of sunlight cut through the glass, falling directly across the envelope in my hand. Vanessa watched me as I walked toward the door, her eyes narrow, sharp, calculating. She had no idea that the thing she feared most wasn't what was inside that box. It was that Andrew still had a voice, and he'd chosen to speak through me. As I stepped outside, the air smelled clean again, washed, renewed. I closed my hand around the key, feeling its edges press into my skin. And for the first time since I'd lost my son, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever waited inside that safety deposit box, it wasn't just a secret. It was the truth. The glass door of Langston and Associates clicked shut behind me, sealing away the scent of cedar and paper. Outside, the parking lot gleamed, wet, silver, and still trembling from the rain. I clutched the envelope and the tiny brass key in my hand. Its metal edge pressed into my palm, heavier than its size should allow. "Mrs. Holloway. Careful, it's still slippery." Mia Collins, the receptionist, held the door open a crack and offered me a napkin. I gave her a faint smile. "Thank you, dear." The air was sharp, rain-sweet and quiet, until the staccato of heels broke across the pavement. Vanessa. She emerged from the building like a storm dressed in black, coat fluttering, hair still damp and glinting under the gray light. Behind her followed Lucas Carter, phone in hand, tapping absently, eyes scanning the lot as if calculating moves on a chessboard. "Margaret," she called, her tone tight, deliberate. "We need to talk." I turned slowly, keeping the envelope close to my chest. "About what?" She stopped a few steps away, that poised half-smile painted back on. Her voice softened. The performance beginning again. "Let's be reasonable. Whatever's in that safety deposit box, we should open it together. Andrew would have wanted us to handle things as a family," Lucas added, his tone low and lawyerly. "The smart thing is to share information early, avoid misunderstandings." I glanced at their cars gleaming in the puddles, her silver BMW, his black sedan, two perfect reflections of greed and arrogance. "My son was very clear," I said evenly. "The box belongs to me." Vanessa took a step closer, her perfume sharp, expensive. "I have contacts at First National. I can expedite the paperwork. It'll be easier if we—" "Contacts," I cut in. "Of course you do." For a beat, the world went still except for the drip of water from the awning. Then she leaned forward, her voice lowering to a threat disguised as sympathy. "Don't forget, Margaret, you don't have a home. You need my goodwill more than I need yours." The quiet inside me snapped, not loudly but cleanly like glass under pressure. I took one deliberate step toward her. "Actually, Vanessa," I said, my voice calm, cold, each word carved from stone, "I don't think I need anything from you at all." Her mask faltered. First confusion, then anger, then something that looked dangerously close to fear. Behind her, Lucas shifted his stance, exhaling through his nose. "We can contest that clause," he muttered. "At the very least, delay access." I nodded once. "You can try. But delays don't change the truth." A gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and magnolia from the trees. The puddles shimmered under the pale sunlight breaking through the clouds, thin blades of gold slicing the gray. Vanessa tried again, softer this time, almost pleading. "I'm just trying to help you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, you're trying to help yourself." The politeness fell from her face like paint peeling off glass. "When are you going to the bank?" she demanded. "I'll be there. I need to see what's inside." "No," I said simply. "You won't." Her jaw twitched. Lucas closed his notebook, patience running out. "Fine," he said. "Do it your way. But don't be surprised when you get a letter from our attorney." I'm used to being summoned, I said, meeting his gaze. Only this time it's because my presence is required. For a second, no one spoke. Even the cars on the street seemed to hush. Then I turned, the envelope clutched tight against my chest. I could feel the outline of the key beneath my fingers. Smooth, warm, deliberate. "Wait!" Vanessa's voice cracked across the lot. I didn't stop. I reached my car, set the envelope on the passenger seat. The brass tag on the key caught the sunlight, 3537, glowing like a number etched in destiny. When I looked up, a single shaft of light broke through the clouds, landing across the hood of my car. And in that thin, golden silence, I realized something simple and powerful. For the first time since Andrew's call at 3:17 in the morning, I wasn't the one being left behind. I started the engine, the tires hissing softly over the wet pavement. In the rearview mirror, Vanessa stood frozen between her cars, pale, still, small. The building faded in the distance, and the mark of the key still pressed against my palm, a tiny bruise of truth and the first proof that I was taking my life back. 3 days later, I walked into First National Bank beneath a sky so clear it felt almost deliberate, like the world itself had been scrubbed clean after the storm. The lobby was quiet, the air cool and faintly metallic, humming with the soft click of pens and the low murmur of polite voices. A woman in a navy suit greeted me at the desk. Her name tag read Claire Donovan, bank manager. "Mrs. Holloway?" she said warmly, as if she'd been expecting me. "Mr. Langston called ahead. Please come with me." Her kindness was professional but real, the kind that reminded me of the world before loss. As we walked past rows of polished brass doors, I noticed the subtle scent of paper, cedar, and time. "Your son rented this box about 5 years ago," Claire explained as we reached the vault. "He came in quite often, always very polite, very organized. I remember him, 5 years. I paused mid-step. That was long before his heart attack, long before Vanessa had started unraveling the life they built. He'd been planning this, quietly, carefully, for me. Claire used a master key while I slid Andrew's into the second slot. Together, the mechanism clicked, and the steel drawer slid open with a soft sigh. Heavy, deliberate. "Box 3537. She placed it on a table inside a small private viewing room. The walls were pale, windowless, the air still as a held breath. "Take all the time you need," Claire said gently. "I'll be right outside." And then she left me alone. For a moment, I just stared at it. The box that my son had touched, sealed, and entrusted to me. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside was a neat stack of documents bound in folders, and on top of them, a single envelope with my name written in Andrew's handwriting. "Mom." The sight of it undid me. My knees nearly gave out as I sat down, clutching the letter like something fragile, holy. I broke the seal and began to read. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and that probably means Vanessa has shown you exactly who she really is. I'm sorry for that. But I'm not surprised. You gave us $40,000 for our house. You called it a loan, but you never asked for repayment. I've spent the last 5 years making sure that money grows, and that you'll never need anyone's permission to have a home again. Inside this box are investment portfolios and account documents, all in your name. As of last quarter, they total $185,000. Every cent is yours. But that's not all. I've also included copies of emails, messages, and financial records, proof of how Vanessa's been manipulating both of us for years. I kept everything, not to hurt her, but to protect you. You deserve peace, Mom, and freedom. Please use this money to build the life you want. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere that finally belongs to you. And don't tell Vanessa about this until you're far away from her. Love, Andrew." I sat there reading and rereading his words, tears falling silently onto the page. Each line felt like he was still here, steady, thoughtful, quietly taking care of me the way he always had. When I finally lifted my gaze, I noticed the rest of what he'd left. 3 thick folders, one labeled investments, one labeled personal accounts, and one marked, in Andrew's handwriting, documentation. I opened the last one. Inside were printed screenshots, emails, credit card statements, a meticulous record of every lie Vanessa had told. Her messages to her sister, her complaints about me, even her plans to push me out of the house after Andrew's death. Every betrayal captured in ink. My vision blurred. But this time it wasn't from grief. It was pride. He'd seen everything. He'd known. And he'd acted, not with anger, but with foresight and love. When I finally stepped out of the viewing room, Claire looked up from her desk and smiled softly. "Did you find what you needed, Mrs. Holloway?" I returned the smile, though my eyes were still wet. "Yes," I whispered. "More than I ever expected." She helped me place the folders into a large envelope. As I thanked her, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. The same woman who had once stood on a rainy driveway, told she was nothing. But now her shoulders were square, her eyes steady, her silence no longer hollow. It was powerful. As I walked out of the bank, sunlight spilled through the high windows, washing over me in gold. The world looked the same. Cars moving, people talking, the hum of ordinary life. But I wasn't the same woman who'd checked into that motel. In my hands, I carried proof. Proof that my son had loved me enough to protect me long before I knew I needed it. Proof that karma doesn't always wait for you to fight back. Sometimes it's already been set in motion by the hands of those who truly love you. And as the glass doors closed behind me, I whispered to the sky, "Thank you, Andrew. You kept your promise." The following afternoon, my phone rang just as I was setting down a cup of motel coffee. The number flashing on the screen made me pause. Vanessa. Her voice came sweet, too sweet. "Margaret, I was wondering if you'd like to come by for lunch today. I made your favorite chicken salad. I think we should talk." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uneasy before answering softly, "That's very thoughtful of you, Vanessa. I'll be there at noon." If she was surprised, she hid it well. But I could hear something beneath the sweetness, a thin thread of panic, straining. Her house looked almost identical to the day I'd left. Neat, perfect, curated. But there was something sterile about it now, like a showroom trying too hard to mimic a home. Even the flowers on the dining table looked rehearsed. Lilies again. Always lilies. Vanessa greeted me at the door in a flowing white dress, pearls glinting at her neck. "Margaret, you look lovely," she said, that familiar practiced warmth back in her tone. "And you made quite the effort," I replied gently. "I see you're doing well." The table was set with wedding china and crystal glasses. The smell of chicken salad mingled with polished wood and faint perfume. Too much of both. She poured iced tea with delicate precision, hands steady. "So," she began, her voice bright, "how have you been managing? Motel life can't be easy." I smiled faintly. It has its charms. Quiet. Predictable. Honest. Her eyes flickered. Just a beat. Before she leaned forward. "Margaret, I think we got off on the wrong foot after Andrew's passing. I was grieving and I may have said things I didn't mean." "Oh, I'm sure you meant them," I said, calm as still water. Her smile tightened, but she pushed on. "Look, about the safety deposit box. Maybe we should discuss how to handle whatever Andrew left. He would have wanted us to work together." The audacity almost made me laugh. "Work together," I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue like something sour. "Yes," she said quickly. "I have financial advisors who could help manage things. Combine what's there with the life insurance. It could set us both up comfortably." I took a sip of tea, then reached into my bag. "Before we talk about finances, I brought you something." Her brows lifted, surprised. "For me?" I handed her a small wrapped package. She opened it eagerly, expecting a bribe, maybe an olive branch. Instead, she found a framed photograph. Andrew at his college graduation, smiling, sunlight catching his eyes. "Oh," she breathed, caught off guard. "This is lovely." "I thought you should have it," I said softly. "After all, you were such a devoted wife." The word landed sharp and deliberate. Her eyes darted up, searching mine. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all," I said, "just remembering how much he trusted you." The air shifted. The sweetness began to sour. Vanessa set the frame down a little too hard, the glass clinking against the table. "Margaret, you're being cryptic. Just tell me what was in the safety deposit box." I smiled, folding my hands in my lap. "Documents, mostly. Very enlightening reading material." Her throat tightened. "What kind of documents?" Oh, you know, I said, letting the words hang in the air. Financial statements, investment portfolios, some correspondence. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Correspondence? Yes, I said. Printed messages, emails, the sort of things people forget leave a trail. The color drained from her face. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. Andrew, he kept those? He was always meticulous, I said gently, especially toward the end. Silence filled the room, heavy, electric. The ticking of the kitchen clock sounded louder than before. Then I reached into my bag again and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with one of Andrew's folders, labeled Documentation. I turned it toward her. Would you like to see one? I asked softly. Here's a text you sent your sister about 6 months ago. God, I can't wait until that old bat finally moves out. We'll turn her room into a home gym. Vanessa's composure cracked. You, how dare you? Oh, there are more, I said quietly, scrolling. But I thought we'd start with that one. She lunged forward, but I pulled the phone back, calm, unflinching. You wanted to know what was in the box, I said. Now you do. For a long moment, she just stared at me, the silence filled with the sound of her own unraveling. And when I finally stood, gathering my purse, my voice was soft, steady, merciless. Andrew saw everything, Vanessa. You just didn't see him seeing you. Then I turned toward the door. Behind me, the perfect house felt suddenly smaller, like the walls themselves were listening. And for the first time, I could almost hear Andrew's voice again, clear and steady in my mind. You're free now, Mom. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock and the slow melt of ice in our glasses. The room had gone still, heavy, like the air before a storm breaks. Vanessa sat across from me, her perfect posture starting to crumble. The fork beside her plate trembled slightly, a tiny metallic rattle against the china. I could see her pulse racing at the base of her throat. I placed my phone flat on the table, the screen lighting our faces in cold, pale blue. You asked what Andrew left me, I said quietly. Let's start with this. I opened the first file, Messages, archive.pdf. The soft click of each image loading felt like a hammer striking. God, I can't wait until that old bat finally moves out. We'll turn her room into a home gym. Vanessa's face went white. That's taken out of context. I swiped to the next one. Her laughter captured in text. Andrew's too sentimental to kick her out himself. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Her voice cracked. Stop showing those. But I didn't stop. I'd been quiet long enough. Swipe. Once she's gone, the house will finally be ours, free and clear. Swipe. David's mother is sweet but clueless. She doesn't even realize I'm already moving her out. Every word came from her. Every cruel sentence she'd typed without a second thought, now staring back at her in black and white. Vanessa reached for the phone, fast, desperate. But I caught her wrist mid-air. My grip was calm, firm. Don't, I said softly. She froze. Her breath came in shallow bursts. I don't know where you got those, she hissed, her voice trembling. They're private. You have no right. I let out a quiet laugh, not unkind, just tired. No right? Oh, Vanessa, Andrew had every right. It was his house, his phone, his wife. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I reached into my bag again and pulled out the brown envelope, the one from the safety deposit box. I set it on the table and slid it toward her. Do you know what this is? She didn't answer. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me. 5 years of records, I said. Emails, statements, screenshots, even receipts. Every lie you told. Every dollar you hid. Every cruel little plan you whispered when you thought no one was listening. Vanessa's breath hitched. He kept that? He was spying on me? No, I said. He was protecting me. She blinked, her confusion bleeding into anger. Protecting you? From what? From you. The words landed heavy, final. Her lip quivered, but she tried to compose herself. You can't prove anything. Those records don't mean... They mean everything, I cut in, my voice low but sharp enough to slice. Because he documented everything, not to hurt you, but to protect me. She flinched like I'd struck her. I leaned forward slightly. He saw it all, Vanessa. Every time you rolled your eyes at me, every time you made him feel guilty for helping his own mother, Every manipulation, every lie. He just never confronted you. He didn't need to. Her eyes darted to the window, anywhere but at me. Her hands fumbled for her wine glass, but the stem slipped through her shaking fingers. It toppled over, red liquid bleeding across the white tablecloth like a spreading wound. Neither of us moved to clean it. "You're lying," she whispered. "You're making this up. He loved me." "Oh, he did," I said softly. "He loved you so much he gave you everything you wanted. The house, the comfort, the illusion of control. But he also loved me enough to make sure that when the masks came off, I'd be safe." Vanessa's chair screeched backward as she stood. "You think you can come in here and ruin my life?" I stood too, slowly, deliberately, keeping my eyes on hers. "I didn't ruin your life, Vanessa. You did that yourself." Her breathing came fast, uneven. You won't show those to anyone." I tilted my head. "Why not? Afraid they'll believe me?" Her silence was answer enough. I picked up the phone again, my voice calm as ever. "Andrew didn't leave me revenge," I said. "He left me truth, and that's something you can't spin, can't buy, and can't bury." Vanessa sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. The woman who'd once thrown me out of her house was now shaking, trapped by her own words. The ticking clock filled the space between us. Then I added quietly, almost like a prayer, "You should know, Vanessa. He didn't save all this because he hated you. He did it because he loved me. And somewhere deep down, I think he still hoped you'd do better." Her sob was small, broken. The first real sound she'd made that wasn't made of arrogance. I turned toward the door. The afternoon light slanted through the window, catching the spilled wine, crimson against white linen. As I reached for my coat, I looked back one last time. "Andrew saw you," I said softly. "And now, so do I." Then I left her there, alone with the evidence and the echo of the truth she could no longer escape. For a while, neither of us moved. The rain had stopped outside, but the air inside the house still felt charged, the kind of stillness that hums after lightning. Vanessa sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the dark red stain spreading across the white tablecloth. It crept outward like a wound that refused to close. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough, frayed. "What else was in that box?" Her gaze snapped up to me, frantic now, stripped of polish. "Don't play games, Margaret. Tell me what he left you." I studied her for a long moment. Her lipstick had faded. The pearl necklace that had gleamed so perfectly an hour ago now hung crooked against her collarbone. All the performance was gone. What remained was hunger, raw and ugly. Without answering, I reached into my purse and took out the envelope Andrew had labeled "Accounts, Final Quarter." The paper was thick, cream-colored, official. I slid one page free and laid it flat between us. Vanessa leaned forward automatically, eyes scanning the line of figures, and then froze. Her lips parted. 185,347.62. The numbers stared back at her in black ink. Her throat worked as she tried to swallow. That can't be right," she whispered. "That's almost as much as his life insurance. Where did that come from?" "From me," I said softly. Her head jerked up. "What do you mean, from you?" "5 years ago," I said, "I gave you and Andrew $40,000 for your down payment. You remember, the check I wrote from my savings after I sold my house." "That was a gift," she snapped. Andrew said, "It was a loan," I interrupted gently. "You just convinced yourself otherwise." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Even if it was, it's irrelevant now. Andrew's gone. Everything he owned, everything, belongs to me." The last word cracked like glass. I sat very still, folding my hands in front of me. He didn't think so. Her brows knit together. "What are you implying?" "That he invested that $40,000 quietly, patiently, for me. Every year he added more. It grew into what you're looking at now." Her chair screeched back as she shot to her feet. "That money should be part of the estate. I'm his wife. I have a right to it." The calm that filled me then wasn't triumph. It was clarity, cold and exact. I rose too, slowly, meeting her at eye level. "Yes," I said, my tone even, almost kind. "You were." She blinked. "What?" "You were his wife," I repeated, my voice sharpening with each syllable. And apparently he knew exactly what kind of wife you were. The words hit her like a slap. For a heartbeat, she said nothing, only stared, her mouth opening and closing as though the air itself had turned against her. Then she reached for the paper, snatching it up with shaking hands. "This is fraud," she hissed. "He couldn't just give you that without telling me." I tilted my head. "He didn't need to tell you. It wasn't yours to begin with." She slammed the page back onto the table. "You can't walk in here with your sad widow act and steal what's mine." "Steal?" I repeated quietly. "No, Vanessa. Steal is what you tried to do. From him, from me, from the truth." She pressed her palms flat against the table, knuckles whitening. "I deserve that money. I'm the one he built a life with." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the fear beneath the fury. Not grief, not love, fear of losing control. "You built a life on his kindness," I said softly, "but kindness isn't the same as blindness. He saw you long before you saw yourself." She shook her head violently, her earrings catching the light. "You can't prove any of this. You think anyone would believe you over me?" "I don't need them to believe me," I said. "The accounts are in my name. The documentation's already filed. It's done." Her breath hitched, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Then her eyes darted toward the window, the same window where Andrew used to stand watering the garden. And something inside her seemed to break. "You ruined everything," she whispered. "No, Vanessa," I said quietly. "You did." The words hung there, heavy and absolute. I picked up the statement, folded it neatly, and slipped it back into the envelope. My voice softened. Not pitying, just final. "Andrew didn't leave me vengeance. He left me freedom. You can keep the house, the cars, the trophies. I have peace, and that's worth more than all of it." I turned toward the door. Behind me came a soft, strangled sound, a sob or maybe a gasp. When I glanced back, Vanessa had sunk into her chair, staring blankly at the envelope as if it might vanish if she wished hard enough. The sunlight spilled through the window then, catching the wine stain on the tablecloth and turning it from red to gold. I paused in the doorway, feeling the warmth on my face, and said, almost to myself, "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and leaves quietly through the front door." Then I stepped out, closing the door behind me with the gentlest click. I was almost at the door when Vanessa's voice stopped me, cracked, frantic, stripped bare of every ounce of poise. "Wait," she gasped. "Please, Margaret, don't leave. We can fix this." I turned slowly. She was trembling now, mascara streaked, fingers clutching the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Fix this," I echoed softly. "You mean undo the truth?" Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "You don't understand. I was under pressure. Everyone expected me to be perfect. The perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect everything. Andrew never saw how hard it was." I took a slow step toward her. "He saw more than you think." She blinked, confused, desperate. "What does that mean?" I reached into the envelope one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper, glossy, sharp-edged, undeniable. "Andrew kept this too," I said, sliding it across the table. Vanessa hesitated, then looked down, her face drained of color. "Credit card statements. $15,143.17 charged in the month before Andrew died. Spa packages, designer clothes, a weekend in New York with her sister. All while she'd told Andrew they were struggling to afford groceries." Her lips trembled. That's not what it looks like." "It looks," I said quietly, "exactly like what it is." She stumbled back, hitting the edge of the buffet. "You can't use that against me. You can't." "I don't have to." My tone was calm now, steady as marble. "It's already done. You've used yourself against you." Her hands flew to her face. Her shoulders shook. The fight was gone. All that remained was collapse, ugly, human, inevitable. "I can't lose everything," she whispered through her fingers. "I can't." I stood there watching her crumble, feeling something shift inside me. Not victory, not anger, but release. "You're not losing everything, Vanessa," I said softly. "Only what never belonged to you." She looked up, eyes wet, lips parted. a woman finally seeing herself in the wreckage. I turned toward the open doorway, sunlight cutting across the floor like a clean break between past and present. Outside, the wind had changed, lighter now, almost kind. And as I stepped out into it, I realized something simple and pure. I hadn't come here to destroy her. I'd come to bury the last piece of pain she left in me. And I had. The front door clicked shut behind me, a soft sound, but it felt like thunder in my chest. The air outside was warm, the kind of golden afternoon light that makes the world look gentler than it really is. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The garden shimmered under the sun, the same one Andrew had tended himself, his roses, still blooming in impossible red. I paused by the gate, my hand brushing against a single petal, and smiled. The weight I'd carried, grief, humiliation, rage, all of it slipped off like an old coat I no longer needed. Behind me, the house stood silent. Ahead, the road curved wide and open. As I walked toward my car, I thought about Andrew, his quiet strength, his patience, his foresight. He'd given me something greater than money or proof. He'd given me freedom. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice, served exactly when it's needed most. I opened the car door and slid inside, sunlight pooling across the dashboard. In the rearview mirror, the house faded smaller, smaller still, until it was nothing more than a blur of memory. My voice came soft now, steady. Not for Vanessa, not even for Andrew, but for whoever might be listening. Thanks for listening, I said gently. Subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Then I started the engine, the hum low and sure. The road ahead gleamed like promise, quiet, endless, mine.